And you found Hack and Grow Rich. This is the podcast. If you want to have some interesting and in-depth conversations about how to live happy and rich and make a big difference on the planet. My co-host is normally Shaheen Cheyene, but I believe Lenny Kravitz is sitting in for him. He has got these amazing, cool glasses. He's got the amazing vibe. Shaheen, I've never noticed you to be in the costumery business. Explain this outfit that you have on for our regular listeners.
Dude, so it can go from this to African Dictator, or maybe this is African Dictator. I always thought it would be fun after I saw that movie with Ghost Dog. Who's the guy in Ghost Dog? God, what's his name? He's such a good actor. Forrest Whitaker. Ever since I've seen Ghost Dog, I wanted to become an African dictator. And by the way, we are now live on Facebook for all our viewers and listeners. Thank you for joining us on Facebook Live. We'll be asking and answering questions here on the Facebook platform. So if you have questions, make sure to answer it there. And as of this episode, we are getting dangerously near Halloween. And as every Halloween, me and my family and my 7-year-old boy plan a family costume. So this week, this is what we're doing. Family costumes. What are you doing for Halloween?
I'm with you. I was with my family today with nieces and nephews, and it's my favorite holiday for sure. Like this whole pandemic of not having Halloween parties and not having kids at the door really made me sad. So I'm thrilled to be able to maybe next week we'll costume it as well. I'll tell you what, this episode is going to be really interesting. A lot of people don't know our next guest. And I say that because when I talk to this guy, he's either on the phone with the president of some country, the president of some radio network, the celebrity and you're like, how do you know all these people? And what I realize is he's just almost one of the guys that's kind of behind the scenes in network and television and radio. But I put him in the same level of you, Shaheen, as I believe both of you have this Midas touch with things financial related, which means that it seems like you guys just fall into good luck. And I know, and I've laughed probably to both of you, but he's like, well, you just never hear about the dogs, but there's some dogs. But generally you hear about the stuff that works really well. And I really wanted you to meet him. And I want our fans to introduce this guy because I believe as far as a perspective of optimism and happiness and joy, he's one of those guys that just thinks not just out of the box. He like throws the box away and he creates a whole new world. And wow. So I think you'll really like the guest that's coming up here.
Wow. I love that. And on that note, I did want to mention that today's episode is brought to us by Sleep Doctor Glasses, our good friend, Dr. Michael Bruce. We were talking about things that work very well. Have you ever heard of blue light blocking glasses, Bart?
The blue blocker, those ones on TVs in the 70s, those things?
Right. Similar technology. Only Dr. Bruce, America's Sleep Doctor, we've had him on the show talking about hacking caffeine, and we're going to have him on again in our epic CBD series, which I'm super psyched about. We've got companies from all over the world sending in CBD samples for us to review, and we're going to get some of the top experts in the CBD field. We're going to get Dr. Bruce back on, and we're going to talk turkey about CBD and why, A, it is such an opportunity, and B, how you can biohack yourself using CBD, and C, what are the right types of CBD and the right ways to use them. But with that said, one of my favorite biohacks is using Dr. Bruce's Sleep Doctor glasses. These are the Luminaire brand of Sleep Doctor glasses by Dr. Bruce. You can get them on sleepdoctorglasses.com. They come in a variety of styles. These are kind of, I think, the Wayfair kind of styles, but there's also like a Steve McQueen style. There's a number of different styles. And what they do is they block out all the harmful blue rays that are out there. I don't know all about the technology, but all I do know is I put these on about 4 hours before I go to sleep, or anytime where I have increased exposure to blue light. And what these do is they calm you down. You know, have you ever been in a room where the lights are dim and you immediately just feel chill? You feel that ambiance?
I have. And so these change my mood from the light that comes through my eyeballs.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things we'll be talking about on future shows is some technology that I'm developing now along with a bunch of other doctors. Not that I'm a doctor, but I'm developing the technology along with doctors. Ladies and gentlemen, again, I am no further up than a chimpanzee as far as my medical knowledge. So please take that into consideration. But I do have people who work with me who do have medical knowledge. And I really believe that light is the new drug, and how we control light is going to be the thing that's going to impact us from now to 20 years into the future. I think people aren't going to be taking as many supplements, and instead they're going to be experimenting with light, lasers being a form of light, and those types of things can change our moods. But a very simple way for anybody that's interested, if you're watching the show, guys, check out sleepdoctorglasses.com. These are the only glasses approved and designed by Dr. Michael Bruce, the sleep doctor, who was on our past shows, any of our Facebook friends, if you're looking at them, and they really do work. They come with a money back guarantee. I can't stress how important sleep is in the day, because if you're not sleeping, you're not performing at your best. So most people focus on, hey, I'm going to take caffeine. Caffeine is borrowed energy. It's fake energy, but sleep is one of the most important things you can do. So I just wanted to bring that up. And with that, I'm super psyched to learn about our new guest, Bart. Let's bring him on.
He may be one of your new best friends. I got to tell you that this guy, is really funny. He founded a network called Crave TV News. It's one of the very unique networks. It's now in the middle of launching. I'll let him tell you more about that. We met almost 20 years ago at the Radio and Records conference with, the top 1,000 morning show host. And then he went on to found, as well as an all comedy network, one of the first ones, but then the National Lampoon Radio Network, which we used to have an office right on Sunset Boulevard. And man, any day you come in there, whether it was Gary Coleman coming in and out and all these amazing people, like, it was so great. And I think you were noticing that, like, I can't believe that our next guest talked to George Carlin. I'm like, no, they didn't talk to him. They were buddies. Like, he really was a who's who in the comedy scene. And it's funny because we've done some comedy together on stage, but he'll tell you, I'm not really a comedian. I'm just the guy behind the scenes, the comedians. But he's pretty damn funny. I think you could probably find that he could do stand up. So yeah, unmute him and let's see if we can get our new buddy in. His name is Kent Emmons. He's the CEO of Crave News and probably the funniest guy you've never met yet, Shaheen. So you're gonna have a blast. We talk about some of the hacks that made this guy one of the most successful media personalities in America. Kent Emmons, good to see you, brother.
Brother Bart, good to see you. And Shaheen, great to meet you.
Welcome on board. Can't wait to hear more about you.
You vaguely resemble an African dictator.
Oh, fantastic.
seems like we might have met in Gambia at one time or another.
Possible. That would be fun. Did I have lots of gold that I could not get out of the country? But if you just sent me $5,000.
Yes, but you took that out of my teeth, and I'm coming to get you for that.
Love it.
It was a bad poker game for me.
Good. I think you're joining us from Nashville today. Now, Kent, you just moved your studio from Los Angeles to Nashville, part of the politics and the crazy world that we're living in for the Crave Network. How is your new studio coming? And tell us what's happening with the Crave News Network.
It's good. It's under construction. And, as you know, Bart, we've got a beautiful facility there in California. And when COVID happened, California closed things down so tight that many productions have moved here to Tennessee, down to Texas, Georgia, Florida, and we're one of those. And which is a shame because we built 3 amazing big networks in California. Love it, but I'm afraid that's a place that's probably going to be out of business for quite some time.
Wow. Sorry to hear that, Shaheen. I know that's your home. Are you okay?
We're coming back, man. We're coming back. I was on Venice Beach over the weekend, and man, they had cleaned it up in the best way possible. I mean, the cops were there. I think it was the sheriff, because I think it's that sheriff that we have now that's really making an impact there. And they were doing
the sheriff there in LA County. I was with him a couple of weeks ago. Alex Villanueva, a great guy, really first-class guy. And he's defying the governor and he's defying the county commissioners. And he's going out and cleaning it up. And he's also, he's been amazing. He's been the best sheriff we've had in 15 years and a great guy.
Yeah, he's done it in a very kind way. Because when I was there, they had one group of cops comes out and they're kind of the heads, like you need to move along. And then another set comes out and it's like, well, here's food. And then another completely other set of cops came out and they were like, here's tickets for somewhere to stay. And of course, the majority of them took it, but some of them threw it back at them, which was amazing. But, you know, it just goes to show, I think, you know, not all the homeless in Los Angeles are hungry. And it's a complicated problem. We're not going to get into it. More importantly, talking about people who are crazy or seemingly crazy, about 11 years ago, you, my friend, posted what is a video that now has over 11 million views. And
I did?
This was 11 years ago. Yes, you did.
Not the rated X video. That's a different
Yes, you
one,
did.
Kent.
I
No,
remember
it's
that
not.
one. I couldn't sit down for a week after that taping.
Now,
The Prisoners R Us video, is that the one, Kent?
Yeah, that one. That was it.
let's take a quick look at this. I wanted to share this with everybody.
Ken Emmons, Harry Cason, National Lampoon Comedy Countdown.
And here's the guy you had
Out
on.
to the KXOL weather tower.
I love him.
And he'd play the ET.
Absolutely love
and then
him.
you'd come on and you'd say that.
Wow, I haven't seen that video or this.
Eventually became Al Sleep. I would do a little of that kind of far out guy.
Can you do a little bit of that for us here?
Hey baby, what's happening? Que pasa? Que what you call it, you pasa? The weather tonight is being dominated by a Canadian low, which is not to be confused with a Mexican high.
The great
Oh God, I loved him, and he was such a good friend and such a great guy. I've got to go back and watch that video. That's got 11 million views.
It's got 11 million views. Now,
You got to be kidding me. Is that
George
true?
Carlin passed away not long after that.
That was his last interview. Yeah.
Were you
And,
aware at that time that he was
no.
having severe heart issues?
Well, he has had all his life, and you know, and he was having complications there, but you know, he was getting a little bit older, and he was, you know, not that old, frankly, but you know, it just got continually worse, and we had no idea that he was close to the end. But you can tell by those two jokes at the end of that interview. I think that interview is probably split up in two different videos, and the reason they did that is because, you know, at the end of my comedy countdown or the Comedy Island show, we would always ask the comedians, what is your favorite joke? And Carlin said, I've got two. So we split it up into two, both jokes that right now would get you canceled probably. However, it's Carlin, so we got to pass. And but he was you talk about an amazing guy that just had balls bigger than church bells. He would go anywhere, and it was always, you know, it was always tackling anything that was big socially at that time. And he was the greatest.
What was he like as a friend, as a person? Because I think you guys hanged out a little bit. You knew him more than professionally.
We did. And I'll tell you, when I first got to know him, you know, when I started the networks, you know, he was just great. And he would pop by all the time and say hi, and he would just stop in unannounced. And when we first decided to start the radio networks, you know, we were going out there licensing all of this material. Some of it we had licensed directly from some of the big record labels because they had the ability to license it. Others in their licenses didn't have broadcast rights. Carlin was one of those, but he heard what we were doing, and his manager was a good friend. And he literally just stopped by the studio one day. His manager told him where we were at. He stopped by the studio one day with a box of stuff. And he goes, oh my God. And he and I had met before, but hadn't become buddies at that point. He said, I love this, what you're doing. I love what you're doing. Here's a license. He literally had his manager, a license I'd sent over to his manager. He goes, here it is, signed. And he goes, here's a box of everything I've ever done. It's got all my HBO specials in it, this and that. He goes, just digitize it, use it all you want. And he goes, I love radio. And, you know, and he would always talk about radio on the radio with us. And he was just one of those great guys. And so we were, a group of us were doing our shows out of Vegas, out of the Las Vegas Comedy Festival. Bart, you may have been over there for this. I don't know. And George said, well, call when you call if you're in Vegas this week. He said, I'm playing at the MGM. And I said, yeah, I'll do it. You know, so I gave him a call on cell. And he said, what nights you available? And I said, well, probably tomorrow night. He said, great. He said, where are you staying? And I told him, and he said, I got a show. I think it was like 8 or 10 o'clock. What show you want to come to? I said, 8 o'clock would be great. Who you going to bring? I had 4 people. And he said, great. He said, I'll swing by your hotel and pick you up about 7:30. And I'm like, what? George, I was like, dude, no. He goes, no, I'm going to swing by and get you. He goes, I'll come. And he literally, in his own car that he had driven over from LA for the 2-week run, drove over, 4 of us piled in his little BMW plus him, and drove back to the MGM. And after between shows, he drove us back over. And he just wanted to do that because he wanted to visit on the way over and on the way back. So that's the kind of guy he was. He was not a Hollywood guy. He had no pretenses. He was just a really, really, really good guy.
Yeah, Bart and I talk about this often. We talked about it on the last show about one of the greatest hacks to selling, one of the greatest hacks to influencing people and achieving anything you want. And that's authenticity. Just be a real fucking person. It's something that's so missing. And when I watch Carlin's comedy, the thing that, I'll turn that off. The thing that strikes me the most about him is just the fact that he's an authentic motherfucker. He is just a guy where he doesn't give a shit. And the bits that he did back in the day, I mean, Joe Rogan talks about him all the time. He is probably one of the, if not the most influential comedian in the last, 20, 30 years, right? You had Bill Hicks, you had George Carlin, and, Richard Pryor, maybe.
Pryor was also fantastic and highly authentic. Hicks was the same way, although I only got to meet him once. And, he passed away pretty young.
Yeah. Yeah. I think a lot of those guys did because it was hard, fast living, right?
Kid,
man, those guys were, they partied hard.
Kent, you're not a partier, but his humor is always cutting edge because Kent and I don't really give a rat's ass if you like us, but you better laugh at our jokes. I think that's generally how it is when you're at the old folks whiskey bar in Atlanta, Georgia, ordering tapioca shots for everybody, whether they want them or not. And
Bart, you better give a little context to this story. Bart and I are in Atlanta at a talk radio conference, and we go to this place called Johnny's Hideaway. And we've got a couple of younger gals there with us. They're pretty fun. They're also in the radio business. And we're there. And Johnny's Hideaway is known for being a hangout for really rich old ladies and old men. And they go, and it's all big band music and standards, but it's a really fun place to go. And I don't know why we took those 2 girls there with us, but we did. And they were a lot of fun. And we were having fun. And all the old folks were having fun with us and stuff. And one of us got the idea that, there's a bunch of 80-year-old people in here. Let's buy tapioca shooters for everyone. First time I've ever had a 92-year-old woman tell me to fuck off. But Bart took her home, so it wasn't a total loss.
Oh,
that's not entirely true, but I cannot confirm or deny that her teeth came out.
Oh.
Oh, God. That was a fun night, though. That was a fun bunch of people, too, down there.
No, but I bring it up because what my point was that Kent's one of the few people I know that everybody generally likes Kent. Like, I don't know anyone that doesn't like you. I have a list of enemies a mile long, Kent, but yet you also will say the most offensive joke in any crowd because you just have these big cojones. Do you find that gets you in trouble, or is there ever a point when you go, the culture's changed a little bit? I might get myself canceled if I tell the same joke today as it did 10 years. Like, how do you navigate that, both being a CEO and
first
and
of all, I run the network. How are you going to cancel me? And so it's not like Roger Ailes where he has a bunch of shareholders and all that kind of stuff where he gets canceled for doing whatever he supposedly did, which, by the way, I don't believe any of that stuff. But I don't really care. I'm an entrepreneur. I've made mine. And I tend to just spew out what I think everybody else is thinking too. And I think, Bart, that's why guys like you and I don't get in trouble when we go there, because the other people are thinking the same thing. They just doesn't come out of their mouth. With us, no filter.
So let's dig into that a little bit, Kent. Bart has told me a lot about what you do, but why don't you tell our viewers and listeners a little bit about your entrepreneurial journey and how you got to where you are and what you're doing now?
Sure. My journey started in Southern Illinois. Son of a local banker, and they still live back in my hometown. I get over there all the time. Matter of fact, had one of my cousins down here in Nashville visiting us this weekend, and little town in southeastern Illinois. And I had a lemonade stand when I was 5. My mom taught me how to buy. Here's what it costs for the lemonade. Or for the lemons. Here's what it costs for the sugar. Here's what it costs to do this. And we let you put it on one side. Now here's what you sell it for. Here's how many cups we get out of one thing, and here's your profit. And I thought, that's pretty easy. So, from 5 or 6 years old, kind of doing that. And then I've always kind of had that independent streak. And I've always probably had a few more dollars squirreled away in my shoebox than most, because I had the lemonade stand. Then I was mowing yards, got to where I had a list of about 25 yards that I mowed every single year all the way through high school. And so I've always kind of liked setting my own schedule. And you talk about a great margin. Back in the lawn mowing business, you had a push mower that you paid $130 for, and it lasted 3 years. And, you burned through a gallon of gas, maybe twice a week or 3 times a week. And you're getting, between $15 and $30 a yard. That's some pretty good margin. And so I love doing that. And so, coming out of that, I was always looking for entrepreneurial opportunities, like putting the caddies together at the golf course, doing that kind of thing and taking a little cut. Or we were doing what kind of got me into the business that I ended up in for life was the entertainment business. And we would do dances at the local swimming pool hall. It's got a really pretty old building that was built in the 40s, one of those WPA projects and it has a balcony that overlooks the swimming pool there in our little farm town. And we could get a couple hundred people in there. So I'd hire a band for $50, charge $2, pray to God that at least, 25 people showed up. And they always did. And we always, usually would make, $300, $400, $500, a dance on that, and started doing that and promoting dances and promoting little ticketed events and stuff. And that got me into artist management and wound up managing several bands and got in the music publishing business with that. And when I was doing that, we had a pretty nice score and started buying radio stations back in the early 90s and doing niche formats that nobody else was doing, and formats that I wouldn't have any competition in. And that's really kind of how we grew into what we did. The first format was a format we called the vacation radio format, and it was in Branson, Missouri. And have you guys ever been to like Disney down in Orlando?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. So if you go there and you're driving into the parking lot, now this is going back in the 90s when I think Disney only had 3 parks there. They had Epcot, Disney, and something else, I think. But you drive into the parking lots and they had what was called Disney Radio. Now, this was not the kids radio network that was all over the country. This was just a little local radio, or a little, on park radio station. And there were signs all the way through the parking lot, Disney Park Radio tuned to, I don't know, it was like 16 something AM, some expanded band AM station. And you tune it in, and it's about a 20-minute loop of information. And it had, hey, today at Disney, we've got this going on and that going on. And don't forget to swing by the magic shop and that type of thing. So I thought, wow, that's a really interesting format. I bet a lot of people listen to it. It was kind of boring. By the way, there's an Amazon guy on my screen. Is that right?
Yeah, go on. We just lost video for 2 seconds, but continue.
Got it. I thought maybe I had a package at the door. So did somebody order a pizza? Anyway, so I thought that was kind of an interesting thing. And I was doing a lot of business in these markets like Branson, Missouri, which is, it's a huge tourist market. But instead of being like Disney, where it's all under one umbrella, it's almost like a Disney. Collectively, if you collected, all the mom and pop go-kart, things and rides and putt-putts and hotels and all that kind of stuff. And I thought, that would be kind of an interesting radio format to do there, and then sell the advertising to all those people that are coming in. So it happened, I was back home in my hometown for Christmas, and I mentioned to one of the guys that I knew worked for Disney. I said, that park radio? He said, yeah, that's under my department. And I said, really? I said, do people listen to it? He goes, the managers in those stores and the restaurants fight to get on there because they're all heavily bonused. And he said, everyone listens to that coming in because they're curious about their vacation and they're stuck in the parking lot sitting there waiting to park. He said, we could take that traffic and the example he used was the magic shop. He said, we could take the magic shop, we can put the ad on the first day, start running it first thing in the morning before cars start piling in, first day, and their sales will double that day. And then they will double the next day. And then they'll flatten out. He goes, and then we can take that ad off and they'll go back down half and back down to where it started. He said, you can set it like clockwork. He said that radio is so effective because people are in their cars stuck and they had no idea of anything else to do. And they sure as heck wanted to, be informed on everything going on in the park and get value for their investment in their tickets. And so I thought that'd be kind of interesting. So I bought a radio station in Springfield, Missouri, which almost 85 or 90% of the traffic that comes into Branson comes through Springfield, Missouri, which is north of Branson about, at the time, well, it's 35 miles, but at the time it was a 2-lane road part of it. So it was just packed and jammed with just traffic like crazy for years.
Driving to Orlando.
No, this is Branson, in Missouri. This is in Branson, Missouri.
Oh, gotcha.
The big tourist market, yeah. So we did that, and I got 30 billboards out in those markets, and very easy to read. I wish I had, if I was at the studio in LA, I've got some of those pictures of those billboards still, but huge yellow billboards that just said Branson Radio, 1550 AM, comedy, info, free stuff. And they're that bright yellow, construction yellow with red and black letters on it. You can't miss it. You can see it a mile away. The non-sexiest billboards you'll ever see, but you couldn't miss them.
Ugly sells.
And yeah, ugly sells. Well, noticeable sells. And so we did this, and I divided up the clock. If you took a 1-hour clock, so, in radio, you work off of a clock, looks like a pie, cut into about, depending on how you do it, we were doing 60-second spots. So cut into about, 60 spots, but we sold 45 spots. So you either got a 1-minute spot for $1,500 an hour, $1,500 a month. You got a 1-minute spot, or you got 2 30-second spots. Either way, you could chop it up, keep it one, whatever. And then on top of that, we would interview, like, Branson, Missouri had a lot of big celebrities, like older celebrities that catered to an older drive-in type of market. So you had Andy Williams, Boxcar Willie, Jim Stafford, a guy that nobody knows unless you've been to Branson, Soji Tabuchi, who was the biggest show in town, was a Japanese fiddle player, Mel Tillis, Roy Clark, a bunch of those old acts, Mickey Gilley. And so we sold those spots to, folks like that, to the go-kart tracks, to all the attractions, the marinas, all that kind of stuff. And it took off, and it did well, and people listened. And one of the things we found that people really liked in it is they commented on our comedian, who was somebody that we had produced when I was still in the music business for years. And so a guy that's still unknown, his name is Milton Crabapple, very, very close friend of mine. His real name is Hal Coleman. He's the #1 pest control marketing guy in the country. But he has these funny things called Milton Crabapple. So we were running those because they were totally clean and family. And people started calling the station going, where is that guy playing? Does he have a theater? And they were going bananas over the comedy. So
hold on. How much does it cost to buy a radio station? That sounds like something that would cost a lot of money.
Well, that one I paid you want to take a Bart? You probably know the answer, but Shaheen, you want to guess?
But I don't know the upfront.
I'd say $1 million.
That one was $130,000
total. His car is less than that. Shaheen has at least 3 cars across the
And where did you at that time get $130,000?
Well, it's funny you ask. I borrowed it from a bank in Arkansas, one of the greatest bank presidents in the world, who ended up becoming a bank co-founder with me many years later. And coincidentally, it's the same bank that made the original Whitewater loans to Clinton and all those folks. So it was a bank at the time owned by Chris Wade, and the feds had come in, taken it over, brought this new CEO to clean it up. A little tiny bank in Flippin, Arkansas.
Yeah.
It was started by Chris Wade and Forrest Woods. Forrest owned and was the founder of what's the big boat company? Not Tracker, but the other bass boat company. I'm drawing a blank now. Anyway, Forrest Woods.
So you're 25. You go in this bank and you say, I want to not play music. I want to run 100% ads and turn the radio business on their head. Didn't they look at you like you had 3 eyeballs?
Not really, because, I could clearly pay, if it didn't work, I could clearly pay it off. But they got the concept, they figured it, and my payment on it was like, I don't know, $600 a month or something like that, and or maybe $1,000 a month, or maybe $1,000 out of whatever it was. It was not a lot, and I kind of saw it as a one of those deals that if it didn't work, I would maybe lose, because for the startup cost, you had the 130, but then you also had to produce all the billboards and do the deposits on the billboards, and then do a lot of production. So this whole, total startup was probably $225,000. So I figured at worst I could sell the station for 130, if it didn't work out, and then we lose a few bucks. But
What
but it
year
really
was
took
this?
off. This was in 92, I guess, 92, 93.
Okay,
And
not
just to be
that
clear,
long.
you
Yeah.
said you charged Mel Tillis for the time. You didn't interview him for free. There's
No,
no
we,
content
yeah.
on that radio station. Everything is paid.
No, everything is paid, 100% paid, except for the comedy. So the comedy, we use that as kind of so what we did, we did very, very well, obviously, with that concept. Then we did another one in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee, which is Pigeon Forge, Gatlinburg, where I consider home in East Tennessee, and did very well. And also did Myrtle Beach, did the same thing. And then we started partnering with some timeshare companies. And have you guys ever been on vacation and people, you'll be walking into a store at a mall or something like that in a vacation destination, and they'll say, "Hey, I got some free tickets here. All you got to do is come and listen to our 90-minute presentation." And you guys have been hit with that, right?
Right.
Oh yeah, we've
Yeah.
suffered through that.
Yeah. So it's interesting that there was a little tiny timeshare operator there in Branson, who eventually became, and still is, one of my best friends for 30 years. Great guy. And he said, "You know what?" He said, "You're getting all those people listening to you." He goes, "Why don't we put a welcome center up on the highway between Springfield and Branson, right off an exit? And we'll run them in there, and we'll figure out, ways to get them in. We'll, of course, talk about it on the radio a bunch." And by the way, the radio sounded live. I used what was called it was a computerized system called Selector, and it sounded live. I hosted the whole thing, but I only had to do it once a year. But it always sounded live because the people were coming in, and they were only on there for an hour and a half, 2 hours, and everything fired off at different times. So it was always different interviews, and hey, coming up now, and then it was up-to-date weather that was automated. Remember Bart AccuWeather? It would automatically trigger into your feed. So
LA Story, where it was always sunny 24 hours a day with Steve Martin.
Sunny said no. AccuWeather actually, the AccuWeather, Alan Archer with AccuWeather. They would actually read the weather reports. Some guy sat in Atlanta, I think, and read weather reports for the top 200 markets. That's all he did all day. And I'm sure they had a bunch of guys doing it. But hey, today, Springfield, Branson weather, it's going to be da-da-da. And it was literally
So
up
just
to
to
date
recap, you
every day.
spent one day a year recording content, and then and one guy pushed buttons, and you didn't go back there the rest of the year.
Well, technically, I would do 3 days a year at each station. And what we would do is I'd come in and we would interview all the any advertiser that wanted to be interviewed. So we always had but we would do it 3 times a year. We would change the programming out. We would have spring, which was, more families. And then after spring break, more old folks. And then summer, which was all families. And then fall and Christmas, which was primarily old folks. So we would do interviews I would come in before the spring, and we would interview, again, talking about the Branson market, Mickey Gilley, Andy Williams, Wayne Newton back then was in Branson, interview all those guys. And, hey, you got a new show this spring. It's going to be a lot of fun. We got this, we got that. So we would change it out 3 times a year.
Wow.
But yeah, very, very simple, very simple. And also a lot of fun.
Yeah. So 130K, you invest $130,000 in the business, and then you added some money to buy the billboards.
Yeah.
Came out to a total of 225K. How much profit did you make? How much was that deal worth to you over a lifetime?
Over 35 years.
Oh God, it's a lot. It was good.
Millions.
It was good. And I'll tell you where it really took off is when I partnered with my guy in Branson, the timeshare guy, who is a just still a wonderful guy, a risk taker, an entrepreneur extraordinaire. CJ's his name, CJ Permy, great guy. And it really took off when I partnered with him, because then we've added the Welcome Center thing into it. And there was a great synergy with the people that he bought those tickets from that they were giving away, and then us and the radio station, and then bringing people into the Welcome Center to sign them up for timeshare tours. So it became this real synergistic relationship, and also became a, lifelong friendship.
And what happened after that? Tell us about after that. What happened?
Well, I ended up selling big interest in those stations to him, and then to his company. And then he ended up selling in 2015. So everyone cashed out in 2015 of that group. And wow. But what's interesting about that, and Bart's probably heard me tell this a million times, but what was interesting about that is that it introduced me to how popular comedy on the radio was, and nobody was doing 24/7 comedy. And I thought, why is no one doing 24/7 comedy? That's insane. Right. Because we're getting calls from a guy who had still not nationally known. We're getting calls, people going, I love this guy. Matter of fact, they got to be so good that we made up CDs. This is back when CDs were a thing. We made up CDs that cost us like 25 cents. And we said, hey, stop by the Branson Ticket Outlet and Welcome Center, get, free soft drinks, free popcorn, and a free Milton Crabapple CD. And it was like cars backed up. And of course, while they're there, we're selling them tickets, hotel rooms, and they're getting really good deals on, we're delivering great value for our customers, tickets, hotel rooms, obviously approach them about a timeshare tour, which we booked a lot out of those places. And it turned out to be a really interesting thing. But the comedy, that's when the stuff really took off, when I felt like there should be a 24/7 comedy radio network. And so a friend of mine who coincidentally I'd met through a deal in Branson, Bart, you've met Howard Levine, right?
Of course, he was all through there with the National Lampoon Radio and the other previous.
And Howard, I was just with him, and we just had dinner up in Bel Air last week. Actually, I'll see him when I'm back out there this week in California. Been one of my best friends for years and years and years. But I'd met him through a deal with Dick Clark. Remember Dick Clark, the old bandstand guy, and used to do the New Year's Eve. So Howard was representing Dick Clark, and I met him through that. And we had remained friends and remained in touch. And I would be out in LA doing business. And Howard, ran a big law firm out there, but very entrepreneurial. And so I called Howard and I said, and I'm this country rube. I mean, I'd been to New York a lot, and I'd been to LA a lot because of my association with some of these musical acts and partners in the music publishing business. But I was still, pretty much a country rube. And Howard always reminded me of Arnie Becker on LA Law. You remember that guy? Very not a hair out of place. Everything is just right. LA bachelor, got the Porsche, got the whole thing. And so I called Howard and I said, I'm thinking about this idea, a 24/7 comedy radio network. No one's ever done it before. I don't understand why, because it's a market waiting to happen. And I gave him just kind of my informal data with those vacation stations. And he called me, he said he loved it. He called me back a couple of days later and he said, I figured out why. No one's ever done it. And I said, why is it? And he said, well, unlike music, where if you own a radio station, you sign up for 3 services, ASCAP, BMI, and CSAC, and those are they're called performance rights or performing rights societies. And they're the ones who track, songs that are played on the radio. And so they track them. Used to be they would randomly sample, and then they would pay royalties based on that. Now they do it digitally. But you literally, if let's say Art, you're a music writer, a composer, you're probably signed up with ASCAP, CSAC, or BMI, and they're collecting those radio royalties for you, or club royalties, like when those songs get played in nightclubs and things like that. You'll see a license on the side of the door or something little tiny that says ASCAP or CSAC or BMI. You'll usually see all 3. And what you do as a radio station or a performance hall or whatever, you pay a very, very small percentage of your gross revenue. And you pay that to them for the licensing fees. And then they in turn pay the writers and the writers and the publishers. So comedy was spoken word and it wasn't registered under those. So we figured there were about 10,000 comedy albums as of 1998. And we kind of figured, okay, what record label has them? And Warner Brothers had the biggest chunk. They had almost 4,000, not quite 4,000, almost 4,000 comedy albums. They had, going back to like Mom's Mabley back in the 40s or whatever, all the way up through Steve Martin and everything in between.
Probably a lot of the Bill Cosby stuff, right?
They had the Cosby stuff. They had a bunch of that stuff. And then there was another label. Well, I'll tell you what happened. So I went over to Andy Schoen. You guys are metal guys, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. So Andy, I think, is part of metal. He was doing a business network with Steve Lehman and some of those guys. But Andy was a friend of mine, and this is going back in the late 90s. And he also started in radio. And he was just coincidentally president of Warner Brothers Records at the time. And great guy. And I called Andy and I said, this is going to sound kind of crazy. I said, but I'm thinking about a 24/7 comedy radio network. You guys have got about 4,000 of the albums, pretty close, as best I can tell. You guys are the biggest. And he said, come over to see me. So I went over to see him and sat down, told him what I was thinking. And Howard told me, he said, put your seatbelt on and just assume that you're going to have to pay figure out a way to pay $5 or $10 million, raise the money, of course, for those royalties.
So hang on one second. I'm sorry. So you exited your first radio company. You said there's a bunch of partners.
No. That kept up on.
No, that was his gravy train for years, right? I mean, your gravy.
That kept going.
That was on through 2015. Those 2015. First ones we bought, last ones we sold. Mm-hmm.
Gotcha. Okay. At what point do you get fuck you money? At what point in this journey do you have F you money where you're like, dude, I can do whatever I want, but I want to continue this?
Kind of along the way, I accumulated it.
After how many years?
And I'm not a big spender.
You started in 92.
Probably after the move to LA and starting the comedy networks. That was when you build national value, that's when you build value, like real value. And I mean, something that's,
but the anxiety of you not paying rent, not being able to buy food is completely not in your awareness as of 20 years ago. Like you're always going to be, you're like, I'm a good guy. And the other thing I want to point out is without, we didn't go into the numbers, but
that's not to say you don't get into pinches. I mean, you get into these deals where you get your back against the wall, but as long as your back is not against the wall, you're fine. But you get into these deals with operators that are, somewhat okay or whatever, and you got to dig out of. But no, it's never been like,
you may have to raise $500,000, but you're not going to not eat that day. Those are the kind of pinches.
Yeah. But, but you do, you literally do. I think every entrepreneur hits that point every now and then where you're like, shit, what do we do now? And, we've all had those and probably will have those, but you reach a point at some point where you're comfortable and you don't worry. Those things don't make you sweat as much. But like early days though, you get into businesses and you're like I had a really shitty real estate investment one time, really shitty. That was it was almost $5 million. The market turned down. The property was not where it should have been, worth a lot more. We actually had a deal to buy the property, operate it for a year and turn it. Those people didn't come through. And that was tough. That was like, holy shit, consulting bankruptcy type lawyers, but didn't have to do it. But that was tough. And that was like in 90, 91, something like that.
Kind of like a monopoly. You hit the divorce and all of a sudden you got to start over the game. Like that's what you have to avoid, right? Is those massive losses.
It is. That's what you got to do. And just protect your downside. But something I did, this is totally off topic. I'll get back to how we developed those radio networks in a minute. But back in 1994, I went and I got my real estate broker's license because I was buying a lot of real estate. And I thought, well, I'll get my broker's license. My wife at the time, got hers. She's still a wonderful broker, probably one of the best brokers in Missouri, in Kansas City. And she went and got hers. She said, you ought to just grab yours for the hell of it. I said, yeah. So I went up to Springfield, Missouri, got my license, did the course, grabbed my license, full on broker's license. And I've kept that through the years. Now I use it a lot too, but I'll tell you what that's done for me. that real estate broker's license has always been my safety net. So I know that if anything goes to hell in a handbasket, I've always got that, and I can make a great living with it. So when you have something like that that you can fall back on, or Bart, you for instance, you're very entrepreneurial, but you're also the top handwriting expert in the world, and I don't think that's disputed. I think everyone knows that. And if your businesses went to hell in a handbasket, you can go right back to making very comfortable 6 or 7 figures doing handwriting analysis and things like that.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, that's one of those things, if you got budding entrepreneurs listening to this, that's one of those things. Find something that you're really, really good at, keep it in your back pocket, use it when you need to, but know that it's always there for you.
Wow.
And you've had a few home runs, but I've also know that, you worked for 5 or 6 years on the first incarnation of the radio, 24-hour radio network. And, it's not like someone came in and gave you $25 million for it, right? I mean, it was one of those things.
No.
Like, is it serious? Is it satellite? Like, how do we get out of this? Because I spent 5 years building this. I think I met Steve Hostetter. He was working with you over there. Just great comedians all around LA.
Right. And eventually we did get that huge money and all that stuff. But what's interesting is, going back to when we started the network, so we had the licensing issue. We knew we had to figure out how to get the licenses. Thank God Andy Schoen was running Warner Brothers, and one, he loved comedy, and two, they had 4,000 titles on their shelf that were getting no radio play. Record companies back then had to get airplay to sell records, and this is before the internet was. There's still the internet was there, but it was all dial up and all that stuff, and broadband was only about 5% of the country, I think, at that time. And so I said, here's the idea, blah blah blah. He goes, well, one thing I can tell you, he goes, we got all those titles back there. They're not getting airplay and they're not selling anything. So what do we need to do to sign up? And I'm like, well, what kind of licensing fee would you want? He goes, they're yours, exclusive, long form. Just they're yours. But the only caveat was if we didn't start the network within 2 years, they reverted back. But we needed something with exclusivity to keep the big guys out. So we got that. And he said, by the way, you need to go down and talk to Richard Foos, who owns Rhino Records. Richard Foos is the guy who now owns Shout Factory. So we went down and talked to Richard Foos, who owned Rhino, and they had about 3,000 comedy albums. Rhino, coincidentally, 2 years later, sold out to Warner Brothers. But we went down there, talked to them, and told them what we were doing with Warner. Andy had already made the call to those guys. Those guys said, yeah, we're in. And then went to a couple of other labels. They were in some smaller labels, but some that actually specialized in comedy. Everyone was excited about it. They were in, and we launched, and we raised $10 million. And it's kind of funny. When we were streaming live, and again, there was only 5 or 10% of the country was on broadband at that time. We were streaming more live video than anybody else in the world at that time, if you can imagine. And we hired our comedy jocks were Ken Ober. Ken was a guy who was on MTV for years. Susan Olsen, who was Cindy Brady and the Brady Bunch. We had Beth Lapidus. Gosh, I'm trying to think who all we had. We had a ton of just amazing jocks who understood the comedy business. Carrie Kasem obviously was through there and worked with Carrie. Still,
she has like the number one horse video. And have you seen this? She filmed herself riding a horse down to a beach recently, Kent. It has like
I haven't. I was just on the radio with her a couple of weeks ago.
It's fantastic PR. It's so great. And I'm like, oh, I hosted a show with her 20 years ago. And she still looks 25. Amazing woman.
Well, she's awesome. I'll tell you what, she's one of the smartest, most amazing, she has just a massive heart, but she's brilliant. You know how it is, like Bart, we've seen, where you have like fathers, that make a great name for themselves and their kids are total fuck ups. This is just the opposite. Her dad was Casey Kasem, and Carrie has every bit as much talent and charisma, even more charisma. I don't know. She's one of those amazing ones. And she never rode on her dad's coattail, ever. She literally did it on her own, and she's brilliant.
He was Arab. He was he Lebanese? I forget what he was.
Lebanese.
He was Lebanese. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Amazing guy with a golden voice.
Yeah.
Really, really exceptional guy. So here's a question for you. And I think we're going to be, we've got about 5 minutes before we have to wrap. And I want to get to where you're at now and for you to share a couple success secrets with our audience. But at the end of the day, going from, like you said, you said you were, kind of a country boy, fairly, you didn't have any extensive access to tons of money or great wealth, but you basically
Had zero.
You had zero. You built your stuff up.
I had lawn mowing money.
You had lawn mowing money. Okay.
Lawn mowing and pool dance money.
But it sounds like you had grit. You weren't afraid to, go out there and work hard and bust your ass. And it amazes me now when I look at kind of this generation, I don't know what you call them, but like Gen Z and like the younger kids, where they're much more expectant than we were in that generation, Generation X and the generation before that. And they're much more naive.
They're very needy. Well, they're very needy. They've probably been helicoptered by their parents. I have two daughters. I have one that's 31 and very entrepreneurial. I mean, Bart knows her, Ashley. Sharp as a tack, entrepreneurial. You talk about a hustler. I mean, holy smokes, a hustler. I mean, just But that was the last part of the generation that didn't have cell phones and they were kids. I mean, smartphones and they were kids. So they were out hustling. They weren't sitting around all day, whining about how many, likes they didn't get on TikTok or Instagram or whatever.
Yeah.
So it's a very different thing. And, today's kids are more they're raised not only by the school systems, but by a lot of parents raise them to be more victim mentality people than they do, hustlers and entrepreneurs. Now, I grew up watching my dad, who ran this little tiny, turned out to be the largest bank in south of Springfield, Illinois, but at the time, very, very small bank because they were growing it. But I would watch him call these huge, like CEOs of huge companies and stuff. And I'm sitting there going, Jesus, I thought it was normal. And so I had no fear in calling anybody. So, that's how I wound up with a lot of these, big relationships that I've got. And many I've had since I was a young business guy, because I just didn't have any fear. I remember one time Lou Wasserman was running, MCA Universal. He was the guy, he was a big guy back then in Hollywood, the guy. And I was selling songs for Lowry Music and managing my acts. And I told Mr. Lowry I needed to go to LA. I was going to meet with Lou. And Lou who? And I said, Lou Wasserman. He goes, what? He said, how do you get a hold of Lou Wasserman? So I called him. I said, you were wanting to do this thing with Universal and you had these 3 songs you wanted to pitch. Yeah, I figured I'd call, somebody and find. Anyway, I just happened to get a call through to him, and the assistant let me into him, and I went to see him, and that's how we became friends. So, wow. and Lowry, a music legend, is going, how the hell did you get a meeting there? Like, I just picked up the fucking phone. That's what you do. On a
personal note, I don't know anybody whose phone and Rolodex will get you to the top as much as Kent, which leads me to one final question. Would you tell us about your romance with Phyllis Diller?
You know what? If you see me walking down the street, I will let you guys know all about that one. I will have to tell you about that one.
Oh, no.
That was the other 92. No, I'm kidding you.
They've been dear friends forever, and I've jazzed you about this because I've died to meet her. I wish I could have hung out with her.
Did you never go to her house with us?
No, I feel so bad. She's so great.
She was the greatest, and she was great. And it was kind of funny when my now 14-year-old was born. She was the first person to come over and bring a gift. It was kind of funny. The first 2 people to stop by, Phyllis Diller with a gift, this beautiful antique old Disney book of a storybook that was really old, and the other one was Rip Taylor, who, just lived around from us up in the Hollywood Hills there. And Rip came with his confetti and the whole thing. The baby is here. The baby is here. So that was one of those perks of, being in the comedy network business, because, you got to meet a lot of those folks. And then, they're just wonderful people. And those are the people you saw, growing up on television. So that was kind of cool.
Amazing. Amazing. So tell us what you're doing now and how people can find you.
You bet. So, I've noticed, and Bart will tell you this, one thing, the places we've always done well in media is by identifying niches. And by the way, I'll regress just for a second and go back to satellite radio, Sirius XM. They used to be two different services. Now they're one, Sirius XM radio. When I had started the radio networks, I went up to them and met with them individually, because at the time they were different companies. XM was based in DC, Sirius Sirius, before they went on the air, was actually a company called CD Radio. Then they changed the name to Sirius, but went and met with their CEOs. And it took me a month to convince one of them that they needed to put comedy on their service when they launch. And I badgered them both. And finally one said, okay, we'll give you one comedy channel. And then the other one said, well, if they're going to do comedy, I guess we will. Comedy wasn't something they were going to do. And it's interesting now that it's become, one of the biggest things on Sirius XM. There's multiple channels, there's 6 or 7, 8 channels on the different services. So those are niche networks. I've always found that if you can find a niche that nobody else is doing, that's where you make the money, and you stay away from the competition. So right now there's a real void of news, like edgy news that you can go anywhere with, not filtered, not watered down by advertisers making demands for, well, you better not talk about this or you better not talk about that. So we're doing a news network called Crave News, 100% digital on all the digital platforms, and absolutely real, raw, unfiltered, and fun. So it's real news. Actually, the tagline is real news, no bullshit. And we'll have a lot of fun doing it. It'll be live, eventually 16 hours a day. People can call in, FaceTime in, news at the top and bottom of the hour, and hot talk all the way around. So it'll be Fox News. If you took like a Fox News and MSNBC, bred it with Barstool Sports, something like that. So something very edgy and fun.
And you can't cancel yourself because you're the CEO.
You know what? This is the no cancel network. You cannot get. Listen, I hung. You know me. I'm a George Carlin, Bob Saget fanatic. I'm that kind of. I'm that kind of humor and that kind of philosophical, ilk. So I would have been canceled years ago.
Well, let's do things a little differently. So to close it out, if you were George Carlin, what would you say? How would you close this interview out as George Carlin?
Oh, I would probably tell some joke that would absolutely get you kicked off the internet. That's probably what I would do.
So Crave News, is it Crave on Facebook, crave.tv? What's the handle to get a hold of you and subscribe before it actually launches?
I can't subscribe. When we launch, we'll let you know. Cravenews.com is the URL, and it's just got a holder site there for right now. And when we get the studios finished here in Nashville, we'll launch, and we'll have some pretty decent fanfare, I think, when we launch, and we'll be announcing our hosts. Some of those hosts you'll know, and a lot of the contributors you guys certainly will know. And it'll be a lot of fun. And it's one of those things too that I would love to have you guys on as regular guests. And because it's not going to be one of those where you have the typical talking heads that you see every single day on Fox News or CNN or MSNBC. It's going to be like on our business segments. It's going to be real, like accomplished business people like you guys.
Sure.
It's going to be accomplished business people talking business. In politics, I'm very well politically connected. It'll be, people coming on, governors and senators and Congress people and local politicians, and letting their hair down and having fun, which, by the way, they love to do. They don't get an opportunity, though, in a 3-minute soundbite on Fox News or CNN.
Yeah. Wow.
So this will be someplace people can talk and have fun. Yeah, it'll be a good time. And it'll be very, the graphics are very beautiful. They're very slick. Bart's seen those graphics. And actually, we were starting to roll some content before COVID hit. We were starting to do some. Bart came on and did a segment on Tiger King that was fantastic. But it'll be very authentic, kind of like Joe Rogan's podcast. Joe's somebody I just love and have known for years. It'll be that authenticity of a podcast, but a news network at the same time.
I love that. And guys, don't forget to check out Bart on season 2 of Tiger King. We don't know how he got on there, but it's wild. He's going to be doing some crazy things. You can check that out at tigerking.com. Bart, if people really want to get a hold of you, how could they find you?
This is the greatest setup ever. Bart Bagget on Instagram, Bart Bagget on Facebook. And if you want a copy of my latest book, just go to getbartsbook.com. Shaheen, you got a mastermind Amazon mastery course that they can sign up for?
Yeah, anybody that wants to learn how to create predictable recurring revenue on the Amazon platform by creating an Amazon company, guys, no better time than now. Amazon companies are going for crazy numbers right now, and there is no better time to get in right now. You know, when the real estate market just starts to get hot and you see people buying in, you're holding off, and it's too late. Don't let it get too late. Reach out to us at fbasellercourse.com. For little or no money, you can start an Amazon company and take advantage of this beautiful thing that our good friend Jeff Bezos has started. And also, I wanted to mention the book just dropped, Billion, How I Became King of the Thrill Pill Cult. If you guys are interested in my entrepreneurial journey about how I created a company, nearly broke $1 billion in revenue pre-internet. Check that out. The first chapter is free on Spotify, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, and wherever podcasts are heard. And thank you for everybody watching us on YouTube and Facebook Live. And thank you very much to our absolutely amazing and inspiring guest, Kent. Kent, thank you so much for being on, but hopefully we'll be able to get you on more to learn more about the super exciting stuff that you're doing and to share your entrepreneurial journey with our audience.
Shaheen, it's my pleasure to be here. Bart, great to be here with you also. You guys are amazing, and what you're doing is amazing. And the opportunities you give budding entrepreneurs, I think, is just, we need more of this in America. And I love what you guys are doing.
Fantastic. All right. Okay, guys, have a great day, and we'll see you soon.
See you guys.
Have a good night. Be safe.